Hey, welcome to the Worth Knowing live stream on the Cliff's Edge channel on YouTube, the Worth Knowing Substack, that's my Substack, and the Beyond Politics podcast. I'm Matt Robison, and welcome to those folks coming over from Tony Michael's show. It's good to see already in the comments a bunch of our usual viewers in the audience commenting already. For those tuning in and saying, hey, how did Cliff Schechter get so swole? No, I'm not Cliff Schechter, but he does like to helicopter in to this spot. No idea what he's planning to do today, but it's looking very likely that he will be in this chair next week. So stay tuned for that. Today, I want to raise the issue that I teased in the title, on the thumbnail, and in my Substack post this morning. If Trump really is sinking this fast on day 100 of his second term as president, which we're marking today, what can Democrats do? What should Democrats do to grab hold of the opportunity to stop the worst abuses, to help convince Americans that whatever frustrations and pain and anger they felt that led them to reelect Donald Trump, his radical destruction of our system of government is not the answer. It's not the change they're looking for. How can we put pressure on all the levers of power to try to veer things away from the cliff's edge? See what I did there? And back to sanity. I can think of no one better to help us through that blueprint than the former chairman of the Democratic Party of Ohio, David Pepper, the author of Pepperspectives, that's a mouthful, on Substack, although very apt, the author of the outstanding thriller novel, The Voter File, which is over my shoulder here. You may be able to see it back here, and the author of Laboratories of Autocracy, one of my favorite reads on government and politics of recent years. David, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be back with you.
It's great to have you. You've been a former guest on Beyond Politics. I think this is the first time we've live streamed together, and catching up quickly on some hellos here. Some of my favorite frequent flyers in the comments. So welcome to you all as well. All right. Well, I wanted to start out with kind of the baseline question here. We might be assuming things a little bit by saying that Trump has started to sink. We've certainly gotten a raft of numbers in, a raft of polling in. You are a veteran campaign manager, Democratic Party chairman. You've looked at stuff like this. So I was thinking maybe you and I could walk through them together, and you could point out what jumps out to you, and we could kind of tackle this question. And I would how Chipmunk Milk, one of my favorite commenters, asked, how did we score David Pepper? I know all the best people. I know the greatest people. And here we go. So I thought we'd just take a look at them. I have popped some of the most compelling numbers that I've seen in polling onto a slide deck. So let's take a look at that. For those of you who are listening in to the audio only, I'm sorry, try to catch up on the video. You'll see it on my Substack, or on David's, or on YouTube. So here's what I'm seeing overall. Trump came into office. This is from polling from Marquette Law School, pretty reputable polling outfit, about a week or two into Trump's term in office. And it showed that among his early executive orders, which was a pretty good barometer for the policy positions that he was staking out early on in this term, there were some where he was clearly above water. He was clearly doing well. This is a party breakdown here. Wildly popular, especially among Republicans, but I'm going to point mostly to the gray numbers in the middle among independents as kind of the barometer here. Pretty popular. Recognize only male and female sexes, deport immigrants in the U.S. illegally, expand oil and gas production, and declare an emergency on the southern border. A bunch of other issues, not so popular. Take back the Panama Canal, pardon January 6th defendants, rename the Gulf of Mexico. And you see that stack up in the second set of numbers, which is just overall favoring or opposing Trump policies. Again, Marquette Law School. And, you know, it's the same slate of issues: general opposition, general approval. And then the next 2 months happened. And this is where we seem to be landing. So the first thing that jumps out to me is there's a sense that wherever people started, most Americans are saying that Donald Trump is going too far on the issues that they care about. This is from Washington Post polling. What jumps out to you about this, David?
I'm looking at it. It's a little bit of an eye test for me. Obviously the expanding the power of the presidency is one that sometimes issues like that don't stick out as much as a pure economic issue. So when you start to see him doing poorly on ones that sometimes can be a little more academic or feel a little bit less directly impacting people's lives, that tells you that the concerns are breaking through in a bigger way. I'm trying to find some other ones here. These are
what grabs me is the
sometimes the challenges. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say the bottom one really jumped out to me: deporting undocumented immigrants. 48% going too far to 34% handling it about right. This is Donald Trump's strongest issue. This is the arguably prices are what put him in the presidency. But immigration was a close second. Well, we have Democratic polling going into the election telling us pretty convincingly that this is where it was at. We had Blueprint finding in the run-up to the election, the top reasons voters gave for not supporting Harris were that inflation was too high, which is plus 24. Too many immigrants crossed the border, plus 23. And Harris was too focused on cultural issues rather than helping the middle class, plus 17.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the erosion there among voters on, one of his strongest issues jumps out to me. And then, you see it translate right into the job approval. Are you seeing this? I mean, you've got your finger on the pulse in Ohio. Is this coming through this like really rapid turnaround, even in the last couple of weeks, on Trump's approval and disapproval?
Well, let me say first, I completely agree with you on the immigration issue. The fact that he is so overreached there, that something that is a huge strength. I mean, remember, he knew it was such a strength that he told Mike Johnson to not cut a deal. This is how he tries to win elections. It's so in their favor. So I agree. That's a biggie. The fact that, and I think also that this is an important point. It's a signal that just because you think the other side is strong on an issue, you don't start talking about it, because then they dominate that issue. And this is a case where the minute you had some of these cases, especially the El Salvador flights, the lawlessness, the violating the court order, I think Democrats, whether it's Van Hollen going down there or others, by really forcefully talking about it, move the needle on an issue that if we had been quiet, Trump's disinformation might have won the day. So I think sometimes Democrats think, and it's a hard decision, because sometimes you don't want to talk about the issue that is the other side's strength, right? At the same time, it's a good sign that on this issue, when there was a fierce pushback because of how wrong, they're deporting kids who are citizens. One has cancer, flights, the violation of orders. I think the movement there is a testament to don't always quit on an issue, because the American people, we saw this with marriage equality back when Biden and then Obama supported it. The needle moved. The opposite approach would have been, well, don't talk about it because it's a little bit underwater. That would have been a mistake. What I would say in places like Ohio, and I haven't seen the most recent polls in Ohio, my guess is Trump is not underwater here. But do you know who is underwater here? Elon Musk.
I was going to get JD Vance. I've got those numbers actually. Maybe. Yeah, no, I've got those numbers, and suffice it to say, they mirror the president, and they mirror a lot of the other ones we're seeing. So that's interesting. So Elon Musk is an anchor right now.
That's what I was going to say. In Ohio, I have seen polls where he is underwater, and the fact, I think Donald Trump made a huge mistake, and we haven't seen it yet in the polls you've shown, but in his opening months, I mean, again, Donald Trump's kind of genius was that he convinced everyday voters and workers that he was their billionaire. Yeah. That he might be a billionaire, but he was for them, right? I mean, that's kind of has been the secret of success. Well, that he fooled people. We know that's not true, but no one is convinced that Musk or Bezos or others are their billionaire. And so when he's wrapped the opening months of his administration, the first day of the inauguration, they're all in the front row, Elon Musk destroying everything with a chainsaw. I think Trump really sort of sacrificed his old brand, and basically now real billionaires are in charge. And guess what? The American people don't trust them to stand up for their interests. So I think one thing that is true even in a state like Ohio that's a little more red is the billionaire wrapping of the first 100 days has been poisonous for Trump. By the way, Wisconsin, they played that to a T. The minute Musk weighed in on that Supreme Court race, the Wisconsin Democratic Party rebranded it as the People versus Elon Musk, and they pulled away the moment they did that. So the billionaire wrapping, I think, has been a big part of Trump's poor numbers. And in states like Ohio, the hope is that could actually ultimately get him underwater in Ohio as well.
Well, I want to point out a few things here. First of all, just as a quick piece of housekeeping here, you're seeing that some of the viewing numbers are a little low, and I'm seeing in the comments several people mentioning that they're having a technical issue with the Substack live stream. So hopefully people are getting this through YouTube. Sorry about the technical problems. Not sure what to do. Substack is a wonderful platform, but I guess the gremlins are out today, or Elon Musk's Doge people have found out. They finally found me. I wanted to pick up then on two threads, David, that you were setting up there. One is that you were talking about immigration and the strategic value of going after your opponent's strong points. And it's so tempting to say, well, let's not talk about the ground they want to be on. There's wisdom in that, right? There's wisdom, it's the art of war, right? Like, choose the ground you're fighting on. There's wisdom in fighting on your best ground, your opponent's weakest ground. There's also wisdom in going after where they seem to be strong. This is why swift voting worked against John Kerry. They went after his strongest point. You remember at that 2004 Democratic convention, I'm sure you were there, I was there, came out and he improvised the salute, reporting for duty. This was his strongest point in an election being driven by anger at the Iraq War. And they swift voted him and they turned that strong point around on him. And what we're showing on the screen right here is the nosedive that Trump has taken on immigration just in the past couple weeks. And I should hide the attribution to you because it's covering up some of the numbers here. And just to go back one for a second. These are all of the main issues, right? Cost of living is basically inflation. That's that yellow bar there. The economy is the overall kind of aggregate people's feelings on the economy, their economic situation. They break it out into trade and tariffs, and they do immigration. The pattern is exactly the same. And it basically, you can see the nosedive start to happen with the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case and the Liberation Day tariffs. And it's all in this nexus at the beginning of April. And the last month has been a straight downward slide. And so I just want to circle back to your point that this image of Trump being a billionaire, this is what I wrote up in Newsweek in my previous piece, which is what I call the glass onion principle. For people who have seen the movie Glass Onion, it's all about the illusion that successful tech billionaires somehow have a special genius. And we've really pierced that illusion in the last couple of months. And as the shine has come off, you're seeing it here in the economic numbers, especially with the disaster of the tariffs. And as we've gone after his excesses on deportation, on immigration, now he's deported babies who are American citizens. So that's not good. You see the same thing on immigration. That was a lot. I just threw a lot at you there, but I completely agree with your points.
Well, let's also be clear. In the last couple of decades, to our eternal frustration, Republicans also always had an advantage on handling of the economy. Even though the data doesn't back it up, we're the ones who got the economy going, whether it was Bush or whoever else, they would crush it. The first Trump term, by the way, jobs were off before COVID ever hit. So the fact that they're now underwater with the economy is also significant. Normally that's Republican strength. And I do think, as you said, I've been in campaigns, and oftentimes late in a campaign, a big decision is, where do you close on? Are they attacking you on a strong point and to try and rebut it, or do you end on your strong point? And that's an important and not always easy decision. But when we have the amount of time we've had to point out just how lawless these deportations have been. I mean, as someone said to me today, some of them aren't deportations, they're kidnappings with no due process, or how insane the tear of chaos has been. When you have time to pound away, going back to that one slide, go back to the immigration one for a second.
Sure.
My fear is if we were silent, if Van Hollen didn't do what he did or others, that graph doesn't flip. Sometimes you've got to make enough noise. Now you got to be effective at it. But if you sit back and think, well, that's their issue and we better be silent, then all the, you've seen what they try to do. It's all disinformation. And if you're not in the mix correcting it, they will continue to lead you. So I think this is a really good example of you can move poll numbers if you do it effectively. I think in this case, the way Van Hollen did it authentically. And if in the end, sort of the facts on your side. And by the way, one other element to, I think, this graph, the Trump people know this, they're always trying to insist that they're following court orders and everything else. I think the law, going back to that first slide, the lawlessness of what they're doing, where they're overextending power beyond what American people think is reasonable. I think the lawlessness on a lot of this is also what is sending those poll numbers the wrong way for them.
Yeah, and you were, I think, like referring to this
right
one.
Here.
Trump is going too far in several issues, trying to expand the power of the presidency to number one. 64% of Americans say he's going too far. Then there's the 5% who say not going far enough. And I just, there's another factor I want to float with you here, because you're raising the idea of how important it is to push in the media, to make noise, and to get noticed, right? Like it's a tree falls in a forest type idea. And Lefty Gramps in the comments is saying they have the mainstream media pushing disinformation, basically parroting. The other thing that I think you see in this chart that we're showing here on all the issues, and it aggregates up to this overall approval, disapproval, and the way things really started to go south for Trump right around the first 2 weeks of April. The other thing that's kind of, I think, sneaky in there was the Pete Hegseth Signalgate scandal that happened at the same time. I don't see, I certainly can't prove that there's a direct line correlation between Trump's approval going down and that Hegseth scandal. But I do think there's possibly a secondary effect where it seemed to shake the media out of their torpor. It seemed like they suddenly went, holy shit, we can actually report and ask tough questions. We don't have to buy their total insanity. You're purporting things that are clearly not true. You have people backpedaling in real time, unsure of what their story is, making stuff up wildly and getting caught on it on the air. And the media was like, wait a second. I forgot we could do this. It seemed to ignite something. Maybe I'm over tilting on that a little bit, but that was the way I perceived it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, the media outlets know their ratings and they know clicks, and they're probably seeing that leaning in is more interesting to the American people than just sort of both sidesing everything without any real push. So I agree with that. I also think the other thing that may be happening here is a lot of politics is sort of, if you're not feeling the struggle, maybe you focus on other issues because they make you mad, culture or something else. But the minute you are paying a ton of money for eggs, or you're seeing, you're seeing the impact on your life of policies, a lot of the other issues that might have had you worked up 6 months ago, all of a sudden become very irrelevant. You're a federal worker of either party, but you're all of a sudden getting notes about tell us 5 things you did today, and we basically think you should leave. You're in Ohio, we've had multiple bad news economically. The Intel deal that was ballyhooed by everybody is getting delayed. Microsoft canceled data centers, a 200-year-old almost paper mill shutting down. When these things start to happen, and it reminds me of 2008, 2010, the Bush recession that then kept going and really blew up on good public servants like Governor Ted Strickland of Ohio. Once that bad news started hitting, it really solidified opinion. So if the economy is not doing well, you're paying too much money. In the meantime, Trump's acting insane. Hegseth is incompetent at best. And we're declaring war on Canada. All of a sudden, you have a lot less patience for the fact that things are getting worse in your life. And I think that may also be that the reality backdrop. If someone's paying more for eggs, there's no disinformation that will change the price tag when they're at the grocery store. And if these increased costs are hitting people, all the disinformation in the world is not going to convince them that all of a sudden they can afford groceries. They can't afford groceries that they could, months ago. So I think the economic reality also may be some of what's driving a lot of these numbers at the same time.
I absolutely agree. And we have a comment here from Trina6 saying, "Good afternoon, everyone from Ontario, where we're celebrating that 68% of eligible voters actually voted." And I'm going to mispronounce this francophone name, Poilevre, lost his seat. Mark Carney led the Liberals to a minority government with 168 seats. So, it's of a piece with the fact that there's this internationally felt vibe shift. And some of it clearly, and I'm showing up on the screen here, is cost of living. That was the number one issue, even above immigration going into the election.
Yeah.
And you just see, there's this, I should, by the way, give this set of numbers, attribution is very important. This is from Adam Carlson, who did tremendous work on putting together these aggregate polling numbers. So Adam Carlson, thank you very much for that work. You can see in here, he's put this kind of straight line interpolation. Wow, that is an upward slope of disapproval and a steep downward slope of disapproval. There's not quite as much of a cliff, but you do see this little dip here around Liberation Day. And I think the point is, it's not just about the tariffs. It's not just, it's just this steady drip of egg whites that's going over everything. All right. I do want to get to, in the latter half of this, where you're really one of the experts in America, what we do. But I want to do just, like what the Democrats do now, where we go from here, how we try to leverage all of this strategically. But I do want to hit just a few more numbers to really nail down this point of what's going on, because it leads to both. This is very real. I think we can conclude that there has been a massive vibe shift, and also that it doesn't by itself solve Democrats' problems. So let's just do a few more here as we go through. Obviously, the trade one we've kind of covered here. This is one that I think is really significant, because it gets to the question of, well, so what? We don't have an election coming up, right? We ain't Canada. We all are thrilled for Canada fighting back the tide of MAGA authoritarianism to our neighbors to the north, but doesn't help us down here. But I think that it does resonate in ways that do help the cause, that do matter. And one of them is on this generic ballot. Now, you are a veteran of looking at generic ballot tests. What do you take away from numbers like this? Why is this potentially significant?
I think this relates again right back to the very beginning. I think this is because we see that other polls have Democrats as a brand not doing that well. I think this is about checks and balances. I think this is a concern about overreach, and this is Americans saying we think like we often think that having a check and a balance in Washington is a good thing. I would say that more than anything. And again, you're seeing the numbers tip, as you said, in the last couple of weeks when things seem especially bad. One thing I want to caution, though, all of us, and I know you would agree with this, and we learned this painfully in 24. Boy, do Americans have short memories. When Trump lost, his approval rating was terrible. The economy had begun to fall. We lost jobs in Ohio before COVID ever hit. And Trump was successful at memory holding all of the disasters of that first term, such that when he first got reelected, everyone looked back and said, oh, he'd been a fine president. And that the economy was going like gangbusters until COVID, which was ridiculous. So I think it's really important that this moment tells us he's doing things that are unpopular, but we continue to just hammer and hammer and hammer because the collective memory of Americans changes very, very fast.
This was actually one of the, I so agree with you. You and I may have even talked about this over a year ago. I wrote a piece for Washington Monthly saying that our biggest challenge is Americans' short-term memory loss. Now, I was trying to be hopeful about the fact that at the time, polls showed that half of Americans hadn't even heard about Trump's felonies, about his multiple court cases. And so as the campaign heated up, you could see in the numbers that even Republicans were really queasy about this. And as they learned about it, it affected their vote choice. And so I had some hope at the time. But by October, by the run up to the election, I was writing for Newsweek. I was trying desperately to remind people of exactly what you just said. And that is indeed our biggest challenge. And so I think we've said enough and we've shown enough to conclude that this is real. We're in a 4.3 point advantage on the generic ballot. That is significant because of sorting and gerrymandering. Democrats need to have at least 2 or 3 point advantage on the generic ballot. That's when you ask people, would you rather see Democrats or Republicans represent you in Congress? Democrats generally need 2 to 3 points of advantage to break even, to have a chance at winning the House of Representatives. And so we're above that mark. This is a good trend, but we've got to grab it. We've got to hold on to it. And I think that leads us into, we've got right track, wrong track. We've got numbers here on how Trump is doing. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through these really, really fast. Trump is doing the worst at 100 days of any president on record, including him in his first term, although it's close. But this is the graph that really makes me nervous. Almost 70% of voters say the Democratic Party is out of touch. Only about 60% say the same thing about Trump. More people think Democrats are out of touch than think Trump is out of touch. That is a problem. Do you pick this up as you travel the country?
I basically wrote my books because of this. Now we could talk about messaging and how our messaging can be better, but the truth is, what's so stunning about this graph, and you've already gone through it, on almost every issue, but let's say immigration and a few of the cultural issues, most Americans agree with our position on Social Security or wages or labor or public schools. And so this graph is this way, and this is the failure that we have to fix, even though on almost every issue that we stand for versus what they stand for, most Americans, often close to a supermajority, affordable health care, I could go on and on. Again, public education, dealing responsibly with climate change, a woman's right to choose, same-sex marriage, we're with the majority. So what are we doing that, even though that's true as well, that this is happening? Now, I think they clearly have us branded in a way that we have to fix, but this is something that I do talk about. This also is the repercussion when, and this is changing, which is good, and the new chair of the DNC made an announcement a few weeks ago on this. If we only run in half of America, so they never hear from us in the other half, well, guess what? They believe everything the other side says about us. And that's kind of what our strategy has been. We've been running in, we obviously run in the blue areas where we know we can win. We put all our eggs in the basket of swing races. And for a long time, we have essentially, and some of this even goes back to when Obama was president, we've essentially left most of it, not most, but so much of America essentially uncontested. No, half the Tennessee Republicans who voted the 2 Justins out a few years ago did not have an opponent in the prior year. Mike Johnson has his first several races for Louisiana state rep uncontested. What happens when you're not even in the game? There's no volunteers. There's no message. There's no nothing. It's like, imagine what a town would do. And I see people talking about media on the chat here. If every single TV is turned to Fox News in a town, what's going to happen? Well, when we don't run in places, that's what we're doing. And so although I think if you took those numbers and stuck it in blue areas and swing areas, it probably is different. If you literally are leaving a whole lot of America without even a Democrat running, what happens is that graph, even when, if you ask those same people about the issues, they would actually agree with the Democratic position. So I'm sitting here, Kentucky. I sound like Sarah Palin. Kentucky is, I can see it from my office. It's across the river here. In Kentucky, Donald Trump won by 65-35, but a referendum on universal vouchers at the same moment lost 65-35 in every county. But if we're not running for office in those counties for actually political office, forget a referendum, making the case that, hey, that opponent of ours is the one who's for those vouchers and we're not, we don't take advantage of the fact that we have an issue advantage. So I think a lot of it is us, that we aren't really running a 50 state. Now this is changing. Ken Martin is doing some really good work here. But if you're not running in all 50 states and getting yourself beyond your comfort zone in those states, then yeah, the other side succeeds in turning you into the boogeyman. And that's what that slide, I think, shows.
Well, and I think it goes to a comment that Amethyst Peony made here in the chat about right track, wrong track. And I agree. I mean, they're capturing something different than those issue tests that we were showing before. But I also think it's capturing something, and anyone can do this. It's kind of it's a weird exercise for nerds. If you really want to nerd out sometime, go to Gallup. They provide their right track, wrong track. They have a version of right track, wrong track. It's like, would you generally say things are going in the right direction? It's basically that question. They provide their data for the last 50 years, and the median number of Americans who think that things are on the wrong track, that things are going badly over the last 50 years is about 2/3. It's even higher in the last decade. It's over 70% think things are on the wrong track. And we talked about this last week, the fact that going into the election, David Shore, no conservative, he's a progressive pollster, found that 53% of Americans wanted fundamental structural disruption to the system. So I do think we have a problem here that in some way, even as voters agree with us on issues, maybe it's because we're not running everywhere, we're not addressing their fundamental problem, that right track, wrong track problem, that sense that things are going badly. And for many Americans, things are going badly. They're fundamentally economically going badly. And for whatever reason, we have not remained the party of change. We have become the party of, we're going to protect the institutions. Well, what do we know about Americans and institutions? We don't trust institutions anymore. And we've somehow gotten ourselves backed into the position of, we're not the party of progress and change, even though we contain progressives within our ranks. It's sort of backward. That I think is a connected problem that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I look, even when it's happening, a lot of the messaging that I hear from, our most well-known political leaders, not all, but some, it feels like, as you said, and I hadn't thought about it until you said it, but it very sort of, as you said, institutional, very, wonkish. And it in the end, I think, doesn't give the sense that, as you say, you're really going to get change. And I do think if people are upset about things, I do, we all know, like, who felt more like change? Trump did. Trump did in 2016. And because he was running against the administration, he did in 24. And we need to be that change in 26 and 28. But no, I do think, this is going to sound odd, but when Kamala Harris late in the campaign revealed that her solution on affordable housing was a big housing credit, tax credit, I thought for the average person, like that was clearly a very important. And my guess is, and I have never dug into it, that would have made a big difference as a matter of policy. But I
Mm,
just don't think that voters who are looking for something really different, something pitched as a housing tax credit at some
yeah.
level, that it's just not going to do it.
No,
I
that
mean,
doesn't.
it just doesn't. I mean, versus Bernie Sanders and people have mentioned who says free community college. I mean, and so I just think the way, like, if it's too wonkish, even if the impact would be real. And when I heard that with a month or two to go, I thought, if we're going the wrong direction right now with the voters, that's not turning it around.
Yeah.
And I do think there's got to be some put more breakthrough ideas and more breakthrough framing of those ideas to get out of the jam that you described.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because we have a couple of comments here that I think are driving at this question of, okay, what do we do? That really is the question of the hour. I think we firmly established
Yeah.
that the door is open. There's an opportunity here. Now, one option is the James Carville approach, which is, as he put it in his February New York Times op-ed, play dead. Don't get in the way of Republicans lighting themselves on fire. And I will say that there is some wisdom in that. There is, it's an old political saw, right? Like, don't interrupt your opponent when they're destroying themselves. But I think it risks not taking maximum advantage of the opportunity we have. And there's a real danger in that. And in fact, I think you captured it. So just to quickly, just so I don't miss these comments here, we have Chipmunk Milk. By the way, one of my favorite. Oh wait, no, I put Cynthia Rice up. No, I want to get Cynthia too. By the way, one of my favorite handles of all of our commenters here. I was literally commenting to my wife earlier. I guess chipmunks are mammals. There must be such a thing as chipmunk milk. I want to know more about this. We'll make this a science deep dive later. But the comment is, how do we properly message against this crap when most of Republican messaging is just lies? They won't listen to the fact checks because Fox and Trump say different. And then Cynthia, where are you? Here you are. It's identity politics. Republicans are tribal. They won't listen to any Democrat. And one of the points that you've consistently made is like, yeah, so maybe the way to change the image of the party and to change this idea that we're out of touch is to start at the bottom levels, not the top rungs, and not to get overly obsessed with, who's going to run for president in 3 years? Who should that be? You did a whole perspective on this.
Yeah.
And say more about this. Like, I mean, is that the pathway?
So let me first, Chipmunk Milk, who I also love that name, wrote also, we can't have nice policy with Trump leaves. That's the one I'm saying. But good policy is not necessarily the closing message of a campaign. I'm a wonk in my heart. When I was a city councilor and county commissioner, I did that. But my point is, closing strong with more gut level messages is better than the housing tax credit is sort of a late pitch. So yeah, this is what I wrote. I think that if you look back at when parties out of power have come back, it has not been by speculating on who the next presidential candidate will be in 3 years or rallying around your favorite one, although we can all do that. It's come through local politics and state house politics. That's what Howard Dean essentially did with the 50-state strategy. When we were in the wilderness, Bush got reelected. Obama hadn't emerged yet. It was Howard Dean said, we got to start bringing a bigger party across the country. We got to run in more places. It starts in states. And that began to happen in 2006. And the reverse example, very painful since I was a candidate in this year, was same thing. I don't know. I don't think they probably were thinking about it in some kind of fancy boardrooms. But the way Republicans came back in 2010 wasn't to start to rally around Mitt Romney. It was Karl Rove had a map, and he said the way we will win this back is by going for broke at the state house level. Channel the party from the energy from the Tea Party, which they did, and convert it into wins at the local and state house level. He even wrote a Wall Street Journal op-ed in March of 2010 saying where he was doing this.
He called his shot.
Yeah, he called a shot. It's amazing when you look back. He said Portsmouth, Ohio, these other places, we're still, celebrating our big federal win. And they crushed us at the state house level because we weren't focused on that, and they were, and we've been paying the price ever since. So, we got to do a lot of things. We want to have good presidential candidates. My guess is we'll have a big primary, but take the energy from these rallies and protests. The next elections that will determine the shape of our democracy are in 28. In some states, they're in 25, like Virginia. In some states, it's going to be school board races in 25. It certainly will be 26. Get ourselves on the ballot in all those places. And, some candidates will be, and hopefully you have the candidates in those places who fit the community. The 25-year-old history teacher who everybody knows, who does not sound or seem like the Democrat that Fox News is saying. They're the ones who've been in that school for 25 years, teaching your kids and generations of them. Or whatever it is, the nurse who works, hard at the local hospital. They can talk about the struggles there. Once you start building from the ground up that way, I think the impression of your party is very different. And you also are fighting in the seats that determine democracy. And by the way, one other thing, and Lefty Gramps just wrote this. Even in a gerrymandered world, which, yes, sadly, Ohio is one, you are far better off running and being on message and knocking on doors than literally saying you get reappointed no matter what. And what we had to start doing is the candidates running in tough red districts, we need to start saying to them, your run was the public service. It was hard to win. You didn't win. But you know what? You messaged about what that incumbent has been doing wrong in that state house all this time. You showed that incumbent is extremist. You helped win up and down the ballot. And you broaden the conversation in a way that does not happen if we let that incumbent extremist, who in our case, say in Ohio, sent a 10-year-old to Indiana to get an abortion after she was raped here. We want them to have to defend that, even in a tough district. And if we don't run in these places, if we don't build from the bottom up, they never have to. And that absolute unaccountable extremism at the state house level has now bled up all the way. And for too long, we've let it happen. So I do think, and again, the history is very clear. The path out has been at this level up, not the other way around.
I want to pick up on two things. One is, William Knight, you have really done me a disservice, because with your comment here, you have gotten out of touch by Hall & Oates playing in my head too. I'm angry at you and I'm frustrated, and I want to share my pain with the entire live stream, because now I've got that song in my head. I'm joking. I appreciate that. This is a great callback for me. I'm getting to relive the 80s. I'm actually listening to Ready Player One with my son, and he's like, "What are all these 80s references?" Well, for me, it's home. But I want to go back to your point in response to the Chipmunk Milk comment about, can we have good policy? Because it connects to, I think part of what you're arguing here is, maybe I'm putting a little bit of my own spin on it, is I think as Democrats, we are congenitally stuck in what our friend Bernie Sanders would call big, bold solutions, right? We think very top down. We think federally, globally. We think in terms of national brand and policy. And I think part of the reason, correct me if I'm wrong, that you wrote Laboratories of Autocracy is that you were making the point that not only did Republicans kind of figure out how to use the states, the state legislatures, as test beds for what they wanted to do on the national level to accrete their own power at this lower level and then ratchet it up and aggregate it, but also that moving these state houses right was its own payoff for them. That so much of what affects people's lives happens at the state and local level. And let me just play this out for a second here, because I think it goes back to Chipmunk Milk's point. I think the answer is yes, we actually could have good policy before we get Trump out of office. I think that's what she's suggesting, if it's a she, and I think that's what you're suggesting too in your book, is as Trump continues to crater, as the generic ballot continues to move in Democrats' direction, you're going to see more of a logjam at the federal level as he replaces competent people in the government agencies with MAGA know-nothing hacks, the Pete Hegseths of the world, who don't know how to accomplish anything. His agenda is going to stall increasingly at the federal level. That will ratchet up the leverage of power at the state and local level. And so taking advantage of the momentum that Democrats have right now at the state and local level is its own payoff, because that's where a lot of the action can happen over the next 3 years. I just put a lot of words in your mouth. Spit them back at me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I say in Laboratories of Autocracy, and again, this sequel I wrote, is when we control a state, we need to make it a laboratory of democracy. We need to show by contrast what can be done. And one of the good things the last couple of years is, and this gets lost, we did make progress. I mean, I as much as Trump is all horrible, at the state level, we've done better. You know, we picked up state houses even in the midterm. We have governors out there, and what they're doing in contrast is focusing on, again, I'm looking at Kentucky from this window, Andy Beshear, hugely popular in Kentucky by focusing on a lot of basics that make a difference in people's lives. A lot of governors, while Trump is spiking costs, they're focusing, I look at their State of the State speeches, on reducing costs. A lot of them are going after medical debt and insurance companies and transparency. So I completely agree that one of the, let's be really honest about it. Nothing almost ever happens in Congress, ever. So the damage done is largely happening at the state house level. But the opportunity to make a difference for the good is also there at the state house level if you succeed there. There's a great group called the States Project that does a lot of work to try and help people who want to support states. And they'll go through all the ways these the state houses can change lives in so many ways for the good. And so the one good thing right now is we have a lot of governors who are doing that. And I think that contrast, hopefully, and this did happen. This is one reason why I think Trump lost during COVID, especially when the wheels came off and people couldn't trust their state government at all. They looked to governors to keep them safe. They looked to governors to give them real information versus RFK, who's shutting down websites where you can't get anything. So I do think that's the opportunity, but it also means, back to the question of policy, it's on us to have good people doing a good job, sounding good, but doing good things, because if we have a moment where they can look at us and see us, that performance could really matter. So don't screw
it does
up.
both. Yes, it's a what am I looking for? A 1-2 punch. It is valuable for its own sake. Pursuing the leverage at the state and local level. It's valuable for multi-time guest on my show, Amanda Littman, of Run for Something, makes this point over and over again. This is everything. This is what she does, right? Tries to get sane people, Democrats, to run for local offices. So much of what affects people's everyday lives, we can get leverage over that at the state and local level. But also, your second point is that's how we begin to change that brand perception. That's how we address those earlier comments about, we got to work around the media and Fox News and the way they paint our party and people's yawns. I want to get to a question here. Where was this in the comments here from Lefty Gramps? It's not really a question; it's sort of a point. But we had thousands of people at the Ohio State House, and Republicans sort of sloughed it off. Right? You quoted John Russell in your most recent Pepperspective. People should subscribe to Pepperspectives on Substack. Again, mouthful, but I kind of like the branding. I do. You quoted John Russell. This is what he said. Here's the risk. We bottle all this protest and rally energy and hand it to 10 or so known progressives. That's not a movement. That's a hit list. There's a great chance that right-wing PACs will label, lie, divide, and crush them. It's what the money machine was built for. What we need now is a cattle call. So, David, I am of two minds on this. on the value of rallying and protesting. Where do you come down on it? Is that part
I
of
think
our
it's
arsenal?
I think it's hugely valuable, but and the point he was making, which I echo, is this is not to pick on the mainstream media, but most of the takeaway for these, if they cover these, is so and so is such a rising star, and man, their fundraising's gone up so much since they started speaking out. And his point and my point is the power of the crowd are the people in the crowd. And by the way, I don't really, if the other side calls them names and says they're paid, it's probably because they're threatened by them. I actually don't mind if they don't take it seriously. We might have made that mistake with the Tea Party, and all of a sudden, November 2010, we realized, wow, that was a real group, and they showed up and they beat us. But I think the power, if you do your job right, if the more establishment Democrats or run for something, or the whole spectrum, they see that crowd as the potential legions of people to be an army for democracy, running and supporting those who run, signing up to be precinct executives to organize communities that have been disengaged or suppressed. That's the potential, more than the fact that the person on the stage is famous and gives a great speech, which they clearly do. And we should thank them for going all over, including red areas. That's great they're doing that. But the potential to really have a lasting strategy to protect democracy is in the thousands of people gathered there. Those are the potential people to run, to support, to knock on doors, to do all of it, to give, whatever. And so that was John's point, and that's sort of my point is, and I think a lot of people see that. But if we have thousands of people in a crowd, but we have an uncontested race next November in that district, then we've clearly failed. That's what we can't allow to happen.
Well, I'm always, like I said, I'm always of mixed mind. I agree with you. The thing that worries me the most is anemic protests that make us look feckless, that sort of, weakness is provocative. And there's nothing that I can't stand more than seeing like 4 or 5 people holding a sign. But I have to say, even I get buoyed by seeing hundreds of people out. And I live in a relatively liberal area, so it's not that hard to do. But it does something for me. It emboldens even me, because even cowgirls get the blues, and even Democratic Party operatives and writers and analysts like me need to take a deep breath and recollect ourselves sometimes. And so there's some intrinsic value in that. And there's also, look, in general, I'm working right now on this broader question of what should our strategy be. I don't want to step on it. I'm about to pitch it to my editor at Newsweek. He just emailed me. It's like my most recent piece is coming out like right now. So I'm getting ready for my next pitch, and I've actually been crowdsourcing. Oh, I'm going to add you to this. David, I'm going to email you after this. I want your secret sauce answer to what strategy or tactic do you most want to see Democrats use? I will say this. I think we should be fighting. I'm not totally against the James Carville perspective that there's a certain value in hanging back, but I don't think we should go all the way there either. I think we should be taking advantage, but it doesn't have to necessarily be through histrionics on the steps of the Capitol. I think we should be doing smart, targeted things. I'll give you an example. We're having an economic effect. Now, last week's guest, Ann Kim, who's an economics expert, writes for Washington Monthly, another Hill veteran like me, she pointed out that economic protests work. This wasn't on the show. This was in a piece she did. She gave a list of companies that are conciliating with going along with the Trump project. I'll give you just one example. I prefer more focused efforts. Look at Tesla. Last week, Elon Musk had to get on an earnings call. It was not a pleasant experience for him. There's a reason that he is leaving Washington tail between his legs. Tesla's first quarter earnings are down. Profits are down 71%. Tesla purchases have been down considerably. EV sales overall are up, which means that his competitors are doing well and he is not. And in China, his biggest market, he essentially has empowered up to a dozen competing EV companies that are all eating his lunch. So the point is, it's all coming from the US-led protest, essentially, of Teslas. He's essentially spiked his biggest potential consumer group, US voters, and it shows the economic power that we wield if we choose to. So I think that's one thing in our arsenal. I think there are others. I'm not against some protests and some rallies done right. Like I said, I don't want to step on what I'm gonna be writing on this, but I don't know. Do you want to step on your own contribution to this? Is there anything that you'd like to inject into the Democrats should really be doing this?
So one thing I think about, because I've been at these protests, the ones in Cincinnati have been wonderful, really big. One way I think about it is, why are we the ones always surprised by what they do? Oh my God, Trump did something crazy, so we're shocked by something. Every once in a while, maybe we should be the one that surprises them. And I think the size of protests being so much bigger than anything they've seen before is one way to do that. And this is where I don't agree with Carville. I think if you say nothing, you normalize how bad it is. And there are a lot of Americans who are watching Democrats, Republicans, you see it in the polls, and they're not sure who's right and who's crazy. And if one side's doing something that seems a little bit crazy, but the other side is literally just sitting there in the way Carville's saying, let it happen, then it leaves the impression that it must not be that bad, because even if we talk loudly about it, if we're not even saying it much or we're not out on the streets, it must be that bad. That's how they win. So I actually think standing up, being loud, having a bigger protest than anyone's seen in Cincinnati for a while is a really good way to be that your actions are consistent with your message. If all you do is giving speeches in Congress or on steps, but no one else is doing anything, then then I think you're really undermining your message that something uniquely bad is happening. So I think it's I actually think that what I call the meta message of large protests is really important. If they fail, then that's a bad message. If they're small, that's a bad message. So don't let them fail. Let them be really big. And in Cincinnati, again, we're not a massive city. We've had really strong protests, and they have sent a clear message. And there are a lot more people involved and a lot of new people because of them. So I'm a supporter of them, although I agree with the economic stuff too. I think the Tesla story is great, and we need to keep doing that as well.
I feel like I've got to do several important pieces of housekeeping here. One is there were some late joiners who are wondering, why is Cliff so good looking today and muscular? And I'm not Cliff. I'm sorry. But Cliff, I think, is going to be back in this chair next week. Usually I'm going to host for the time being the Tuesday live streams with Cliff kind of flitting in and out. Next week, I think he's on full. So that's number one. Number two, I am talking here for our late joiners with David Pepper, former chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, and I am full on shamelessly promoting him. Thank you, Jim Williams, and his Substack. You can also, I'm gonna try to bring on here. He's also the author of really like an important manual, which is Laboratories of Autocracy. And darn it all, I had the image all ready to go that I was going to put up on the screen, and it's disappeared on me. There it is. Boom. Laboratories of Autocracy, a really worthwhile book. And finally, I will say that I'm a strong believer in trying to be fairly punctual. And so we are reaching the top of the hour. We're going to have to sign off here. So I hope people will subscribe to Pepperspectives, David's Substack. Mine is Worth Knowing. I'm sorry for the people who had technical problems with the Substack interface today. Hopefully you were all able to eventually make it on through YouTube. We will try to get that sorted out for next time because we want people coming in through Substack. And that is anything else you want to pitch or you want people to pay attention to, David? Oh, we've had a full freeze from David. So I guess that is going to take him out of the mix. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for being on with me. Thanks for all the wonderful comments, ideas flowing in through the chat. Looking forward to seeing you. Probably not next week, probably in 2 weeks back here, and you'll get Cliff next week. All right, take care, keep the faith, and I will see you all soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Matt. See ya.